What's up, everyone? But first off, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who took some time to comment and share your thoughts on that video I posted of that Nightmare Survival solo run with the samurai. Usually I just throw videos on YouTube because I love playing Ghost so much and don't really think anything of it, but was really shocked and surprised when I saw all the views and the comments and the messages I received. That was really, really cool. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. All of that has really inspired me to kind of maybe start trying to take YouTube content a little more seriously. I feel like I have a pretty unique style that's garnered some attention, which again is really awesome to see. So I thought I'll kind of run with that and maybe start throwing some more videos up, going into a little more detail and depth about how I play, how I look at the game, my thoughts around builds and build designs and things like that. So this video is kind of the start of that journey. So I'm really looking forward to see your guys' thoughts and comments and kind of where we go from here, hopefully together. So again, thank you so much. This video, the interest seems to be in the play style primarily and just the mechanic of switching weapons. As I mentioned to some of the viewers in my last video in the comments, that in Ghost of Tsushima, I really heavily utilized the Master Sword. I did primarily play with the Assassin class, so I was using Vanish and Smoke and kind of the toolkit that runs with the Assassin. In this game, the Samurai immediately stuck out to me simply because of the fact that it has access to all the weapons. So I started with Shinobi, didn't get very far, and then just immediately switched to Samurai. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at what makes the Samurai class special and how this particular build enhances it to the fullest. Let's get into it. So the first thing is to understand why access to all of the weapons on the Samurai is so important. And that is because it is the root of the Yotei combat system, is weapon alignment, which is certain weapons are effective against certain enemies who are also carrying certain weapons. This effectiveness comes from staggering. So if you are weapon aligned, you will do more damage to an enemy's stagger bar, getting them to a staggered state. And so as the samurai, you're able to do this against any and all enemy types, where all of the other classes are going to be limited by the weapons that they're limited to. So no other class can use more than 3 weapons, leaving 2 of them off the table. The second, and I think less obvious thing, is the use of switch attacks. So switch attacks, if you were not aware, was a part of Atsu's technique tree in the main game. So if you went into her growth skill tree under Onryo, there was an option here for shifting strike. And what this is when you switch into any weapon and you immediately hit triangle, then it executes a unique attack. That attack is faster than your typical heavy attacks, and it is more powerful than your typical heavy attacks. In Legends, the Samurai executes these switch attacks significantly faster than the other classes. So for example, going into the Odachi, back and forth to the dual katanas, you can do this endlessly. Take note how fast the Samurai is doing it. And then we'll do the same thing with the Mercenary. And pay close attention to the difference in speed. So you can see it's much slower. And how quick you enter, how quick you push the buttons to do these attacks, the pacing of that is also much different. This is the second thing. This is the thing that makes the Samurai lethal. The fact that you can use all of the weapons and those switch attacks, which are extremely powerful, make it special all the way from the beginning. I find it really interesting looking at all the conversations and the discussions online about the balance of this game. And I agree, the Mercenary and the Archer are so oppressive and can be so from a distance, especially the Archer, with the ability to wipe out waves without having to engage a single enemy. But if you are a melee focused player, then the Samurai from the very beginning has huge advantages based off of these two things. And it only got better with that recent patch of 1.6 that increased stagger damage and also increased the ultimate and spirit gain that you get from staggering an opponent. And that will lead us into how I designed this build to kind of play into just the root mechanic of the melee combat system itself, coupled with those patch advantages and the new gear that came along with it. Okay, so looking at the build as a whole, the first thing to really take note in what is the heart of this build is the amount of enemy staggered damage that is applied. So I put in enemy staggered damage in every possible slot where it is an option. So that is on all 4 of the melee weapons, and then the new Samurai's Honor Charm, which is a critical point of notice because as part of that 1.6 update, this charm allows you to put enemy stagger damage in both slots. So if you total it all up, it is, I believe, 158% of an enemy stagger damage increase. What that means is every time you stagger an enemy, whatever damage you apply to it is going to have a 158% buff to it. That is insane. That applies to ultimate strikes, spirit moves, whatever the case is. That is as big of a damage buff as you can possibly get. Now, it is tricky because when you stagger an enemy, their staggered state is very brief. I would say 1.5 to 2 seconds top. But that is why, with this, one of the key elements to playing this build is keeping the pressure on them. And the other half of it is the way that this build is set up. It allows you to stagger very, very easily, especially after you get that buff on the ultimate. So that's kind of the key to it. Keep staggering, get them in that staggered state, and then have that huge damage increase that allows you to just melt through enemies. So looking at the rest of it on the weapons, the top slot, all of them are just simply all melee damage, just so that applies evenly. I know there is some strategy to feeding, on a katana, maybe doing all katana damage, or applying more damage to a specific weapon. I like to balance it out because I use all the weapons fairly evenly, right? Because the whole idea is weapon alignment. So I'm not really focusing on using a particular weapon. I'm focusing on using all of them. So in kind of looking at each individual item and why I made that selection. So starting with the single katana, the legendary is critical to this for me. A reason being is the legendary katana now having the 100% proc to blow enemies back. This is your one surefire way to create space.
Frigid storm threatened to freeze the ghosts if they didn't.
The dual katanas, I choose to go with the Tempest, and that is because of the stat product on it that improves the Tempest strike. So I really like this combo a lot, and I use it a lot, so having it do a little bit more damage is helpful. If defense is a challenge for you, then I highly recommend using the Vigilant Dual Katana because this allows your heavy triangle attacks to automatically parry any enemy that is wielding a spear. So if you have issues with parrying or blocking or dodging, this is a really nice option. And that way, you have a means to parry without having to narrow down that timing, which in this game is a much tighter window for sure. For my second legendary, I definitely prefer to go with the Yari over anything else, and this is because of its added ability to apply the weaken effect to groups of enemies. So for me, I usually play with I don't usually play full party. I'm usually playing with 1 or 2 friends, or I'm playing by myself. So more often than not, I'm in groups of enemies, and this is really helpful to even add increased damage by applying that weakening effect to groups at a time, or maybe hitting a small guy knowing that there is an elite next to him and applying that weaken effect on an elite to take them out that much faster. For the Odachi, I choose the Vigilant, and that's because of the potent bulwark stance. So I use the bulwark counter often because it allows you to get an automatic parry on virtually any attack in the entire game. So really useful technique. It does take some timing and some practice to get down, but once you do, when you understand the movement of different enemy types, it's not too difficult to pull off, and it is a huge safeguard. So with the Vigilant Odachi, that counter does increase damage, and that I find that to be really effective. Again, if defense is a challenge for you, then the restoring Adachi is a great option. You know, knocking an enemy down to his knees and doing an execution strike with the Adachi equipped gives you a very significant amount of heal. I would say about 45 to 50% of your health bar, and that is heal that you can do without without the cost of spirit. So that's really, really helpful. The legendary Adachi is also amazing. In certain situations, I might equip that over the Yari, but I really like the offensive option I have with the Yari and that weakening effect. Concussion bombs, for me, I don't really use them much at all. Sometimes they can be nice to create space, and I know a lot of players do like to use them. They're great for ult gain and spirit gain. But for me, I don't really use it that much. The only reason it's here is because of the stat product on it, and that's the all melee stagger damage. So in looking at the bottom 3 gear pieces between the bombs, the armor, and the Mitsubishi, or excuse me, the bombs and the Mitsubishi, all melee stagger damage, I put on those. That is a topic of discussion that I've seen online with people who have replicated this build and looked to make some changes to it and put their own stamp on it. For me, that extra all melee stagger damage is very, very important. So one, as I mentioned earlier, once they're staggered, we get that 158% enemy staggered damage increase. So having more ability to stagger them quicker is extremely valuable to this setup. When you have this extra all melee stagger damage equipped, it will allow you to one-shot stagger any enemy once you have the buff of Hachiman Zeal activated. So that is amazing. You freeze them in place and you can take them out very, very quickly. Now, if you change that to all melee damage, and certain enemies you cannot stagger them in one shot. And that's okay, because you very likely can in maybe 2. So if you prefer to have some extra damage to that small window of once they're staggered, then all melee damage is a way to go. Me personally, I've tried all different combinations, and I found this to be by far what feels the best and what works the best for me. And then the bottom for Mitsubishi and the concussion bombs, enemy stagger damage is not an option there. So I go with ultimate gain. That gives you 24% increase. And with the update to the patch of 1.6, when you stagger, it increases the amount of ultimate gain that you get. So with having 2 slots of ultimate gain, you can get your ultimate very, very quickly. So if it's your goal to have the buff of Hachiman Zeal activated, you can almost for sure have that activated at all times. Again, especially if you're not playing full party. Maybe not so much if you have a full party because you don't have as many options to attack enemies and build your ultimate. But if you're playing with 2 or 3 people, or definitely by yourself, you will get your ultimate back well before the buff runs out of Hachiman Zeal. Moving over to the techniques. For the class ability, I usually go Raging Flame. Sometimes I will run Spirit Pull. Spirit Pull is amazing, of course, because you get so much of your health back. And also, the amount of damage that you do to an enemy that you're actively pulling from is significant. So again, with that enemy stagger damage built into it and the Spirit Pull activated, you will do insane single target damage while this is going. It is awesome. For that survival run that I did at Frozen Valley, I had to go Raging Flame just because dealing with those Ice Queens is very challenging when they apply the frost to your bar. So the Raging Flame protects you from that cold, which I actually didn't know that for quite some time. So it was nice to figure out and use that. So at that map, this is not an option. I will always use Raging Flame. But certain situations, I may switch that out to Spirit Pull. For the first perk slot, increased melee stagger damage is critical to me. Now you do have the option to do 15% increased melee damage, but again, our goal is to stagger as quickly as possible so that we can get to that 150% in enemy stagger damage buff. So this, coupled with the 2 melee stagger damage on the concussion bomb and the Mitsubishi, really makes staggering very easy when you are weapon aligned. And it also increases the amount of stagger damage you do when you're not weapon aligned, so it's really valuable in that sense as well. For perk 2, weapon insight, so this one again is very critical to this specific build. So when you are weapon aligned, which is what we're trying to do more often than not, your focus attacks increase stagger damage by 30%. So that means focus attacks are those attacks that each weapon has when you briefly hold triangle before attacking. So when you do that in weapon alignment, you're getting an extra 30% of stagger damage to that stagger bar, whether you have Hachiman Zeal activated or not. So for me, I'm not playing this to make sure I have Hachiman Zeal activated at all times, because it still does tremendous amount of stagger damage even when that buff is not activated. So this is huge. If you are heavy on spirit move usage, of course spirited is really valuable. In other builds, most other build setups, I would typically use this, but for this particular build, which is my primary way that I play samurai, this is a lock for sure, because just that stagger damage does so much. And then finally, the obvious pick here is Hachiman Zeal for getting that double stagger damage for a whole minute after you do your ultimate. That's self-explanatory, and as we mentioned earlier, and as you've seen throughout the video, when that's activated, you can one-shot stagger any enemy when you have this particular stat set up. The other thing about that ultimate, so even though there is no ultimate damage built into this build, when you do hit an enemy that is staggered, that 150% enemy staggered damage will apply to those ultimate hits. So the ultimate does a huge amount of damage as well, because the first hit will stagger them for sure if they're not staggered already, and then the follow-up hits will have that increased damage due to all that enemy staggered damage. So all in all, it's a very cohesive setup that works very well with itself. We're not relying on anything that's on cooldown. We're not leaning heavily into spirit moves. The main point of this build is to feed into the core combat mechanic, which is weapon alignment and just getting comfortable with using your what you always have available to you. And that works really well for me. I hope this video was helpful for anybody who took the time to watch my solo Nightmare survival run. Thank you so much. I know that it piqued a lot of interest in the play style and the build, so hopefully this gave you some insight into my thought process and maybe showed you a little bit about the combat system or the samurai that maybe you didn't know, or if you knew, maybe you can expand upon. It was really humbling and cool to see so many people talking about it and to see my video shared and viewed as much as it was, and to see some high profile figures within the Ghost community taking it on themselves. That was amazing. I never thought it would garner so much attention. So again, I appreciate it so much. If you haven't seen that video, I will put a link of it in the description. This video that is here is a first part of a 2-part series. I will be doing a second video where I'm going to go into much deeper detail about pulling off some of those combos and the thought process behind it and how I execute those. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, if you liked what you see, please leave a like, please comment. Would love if you subscribe. I do plan on trying to grow this channel over time. So again, thank you all so much. And I hope to see you out there, and I'd love to see more samurais on the field, because this melee system really is incredible when you get into it. So take care, y'all. Catch y'all later.